Harry Potter is pure boomer truth. The politics of Harry Potter. Prelude. I've been rather busy with school lately. I had originally intended to publish this earlier, but couldn't do so due to other commitments. Slightly miffed because some other content creators managed to put out their takes on the subject before I did. But since everyone was talking about it, I had the draft halfway written by the point I considered it completed, and so figured, well, might as well finish. This was originally published May 16th, 2023. Main article. There's been some discussion on the subject of Harry Potter recently, especially given the conflict between J.K. Rowling and the radical left. I've heard various people make arguments for why Harry Potter is right-wing, left-wing, etc. Seeing as I've read every book in the main series at least twice, not to mention the offshoot books which spawned the latest movie series Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, I figured I'd give some commentary. Oh yeah, I should also mention that also I have read the sequel novel Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. Can't you tell that I enjoyed this series as a youngster? The argument that Harry Potter might be right-wing rests on its nostalgic depiction of the old British class system through the public school. In the US, we would call this a boarding or private school. There is a residual aristocracy in the form of very old, pure-blood families such as the Malfoys. While this is true, the moral of the story throughout the Harry Potter series is that racism is bad. In-universe, there is a latent conflict throughout between purebloods who are from originally magically endowed genetic lines. Mudbloods, on the other hand, are persons who happen to have magical ability and are descended from muggles, aka mundane people. It's the Harry Potter equivalent of calling someone a racial slur. Mudblood has connotations of dirty blood sea, common blood, as Hagrid explains in the Chamber of Secrets. So you can see that there is a sort of residual racial caste system with the purebloods generally on top and mudbloods towards the bottom, but not excluded necessarily. Of course, this arrangement is not readily apparent by the time Harry himself experiences the wizarding world. It's not explicit because there is no real affirmative action scheme mentioned, nor is there any mass migration of magically inclined mudbloods into the wizarding world. This is an important point, because the wizarding world is protected by spellcraft so that non-wizards cannot see or know of its existence. Any mudblood in the wizarding world is there by invitation due to their demonstrated magical ability. This storyline mechanic seems to operate similarly to a recessive gene. It is heavily implied that magic is somewhat heritable, and wizards or witches can marry and have children with the non-magical muggle folk. In such cases, via magic itself, it seems, the offspring will inherit magic rather than be muggles. There are also examples of other types. For example, the Hogwarts caretaker Argus Filch is a squib. He is born from magical stock, yet has no magical ability to speak of. He is, essentially, a muggle born to wizards. But squibs are very rare canonically. This is an important insight to how our liberals think of race. Miscegenation is not a problem, because the best traits, the magical talents, if you will, are always inherited in mixed-race couplings. Race, as we conceive of it, is simply not mentioned. It is a non-factor, never even discussed except in a non-threatening 1980s or 1990s fashion with an ostensibly overwhelming white British majority in that society. It has what I call 1980s diversity for sure though, and Harry himself has the stereotypical Asian waifu love interest named Cho Chang. Continuing on the theme of immigration, this movement of people from the mundane to the magical world via Hogwarts acceptance letter is explained in-universe by Ron Weasley, who mentions to Harry in one of the books, that the wizards would simply not have been able to maintain numbers as a society and would have died out, if not for mudblood immigration. This aspect of the story eerily resembles arguments in favor of outside immigration in our world, that we need the best and brightest in order to sustain our society. Like in J.K. Rowling's setting, liberals believe that the current nature of immigration is nothing to be feared. Outsiders will be brought in only at a sustainable rate, will not significantly alter the composition of society, and are relatively rare individuals selected based upon inherent talents. In other words, a merit-based immigration system. This is the first way that this story is inside of Boomer Truth. Race simply does not exist. There is no overarching group structure other than the government of the Wizarding World, which is known as the Ministry of Magic. There is no in-universe religion in Harry Potter. Anyways, the internal politics of the Wizarding World is basically divided among the supporters of Lord Voldemort and the loyalists to the Ministry of Magic. It's heavily implied that Voldemort and his predecessor Grindelwald are basically the in-universe stand-ins for white supremacists or Nazis. The Death Eaters, who are Voldemort's personal secret army, are viewed as a combination of the KKK and the SS. The symbol of the dark mark of the Death Eaters is a snake coming out of a leering skull's mouth. Obviously, the Death Eater symbol can be compared to the Totenkopf Death's Head of the SS. The dark mark is famous in-universe for being a symbol magically placed by the Death Eaters above the houses of those they have killed. It is depicted in the air as a sickly green marker of atrocity. It is also tattooed onto the members of the Death Eaters, similar to SS men having their blood group tattooed onto them. Black-green color combo with a skull symbol? Where have we seen that before? This internal political division, and the morality which underlies it, can be seen in the description of the House of Slytherin and its founder Salazar Slytherin. Slytherin, not just having a serpentine-sounding name, has a sickly green serpent as its emblem. They are famous for sometimes having Parseltongue, which is the ability to talk to snakes. Symbolically, obviously the bad guys, right? Even a child knows that the snake people are the baddies. The other houses have more noble symbols. Gryffindor has a lion. Hufflepuff has a badger. Ravenclaw has an eagle. Just taking into account the words of the Sorting Hat, the qualities attributed to those assigned to Slytherin House are as follows. Quote, or perhaps in Slytherin, you'll make your real friends. Those cunning folk use any means to achieve their ends. End quote. Members of Slytherin House are credited with the qualities of cunning, ambition, resourcefulness, determination, pride, and self-preservation. These obviously Nietzschean will-to-power traits are frowned upon except when they serve the cause of anti-Voldemort. Pride in one's pureblood heritage and all that it stands for, and the desire to protect that heritage are strictly forbidden. The other houses could be said to be the other types on the political spectrum. Hufflepuffs, being average, normal, unambitious types, valuing fair play, hard work, and justice, might be classified as normies. Ravenclaws, being intelligent and clever, maybe could be said to be academic types of a likely leftist sort. Gryffindors, being depicted as brave, loyal, chivalrous, selfless, etc., are in my view the center-right. In-universe, they take the side of the downtrodden against the Slytherins. The magical creatures known as house elves are obviously a kind of proletariat. Even if you don't agree with my house classifications, it is important to note that symbolically, the three houses represent a cordon sanitaire against House Slytherin and Voldemort. The entire end of the book series is all three houses having to defend against the Slytherins who side with Voldemort. This is the real moral of the story of Harry Potter. The aristocratic guys who want to preserve the integrity of their race, or just might want Muggle immigration lessened, absolutely evil. Every good, normal, and well-adjusted person must oppose Voldemort and his evil Nazis. Every action taken to defeat Voldemort is morally justified because the Death Eaters represent absolute evil. This, in my view, is the true purpose of Harry Potter. It reinforces a moral narrative among all children about the dangers of white supremacy, without being overt enough to just call the antagonists Nazis. The main character trio of Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, and Ron Weasley, as well as several other important characters like Neville Longbottom, are all in Gryffindor House. In fact, Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff houses are not really central to the story at all. So really, if Gryffindor equals center-right and Slytherin equals Nietzschean far-right, then the entire story is about the center-right needing to maintain constant vigilance against the evildoers who are always present but never truly defeated despite suffering repeated setbacks. This point cannot be overstated. The original spat, which begat the feud between Godric Gryffindor and Salazar Slytherin and their respective houses, was whether students who were not pure-blooded wizards could attend Hogwarts. Slytherin and Voldemort just keep taking L's throughout the book series, very similarly to how leftists view reactionary causes in history. Gryffindor won that feud. So this is the typical progressive narrative about the arc of history bending towards justice. On other issues, Harry Potter as a series is interesting for other reasons. There is a strange admission of some things we in the Anon sphere have noticed. Typically, left-wing discourse greatly discourages discussion of inherent problems, such as the problem of unmarried, childless women. Dolores Umbridge is a character which represents such an archetype very well. Vindictive, bureaucratically minded, and possessing both seemingly extreme hatred towards independent young men, as well as an exaggerated, saccharine, and conformist femininity. This is just one example of telling the truth on an issue in a roundabout way. That is, the way that progressives usually do. Furthermore, Umbridge stands for the anti-Slytherin regime which rules the Ministry of Magic. There is something to be said about this, because Umbridge in her zeal uses corporal punishment and arguably torture on Harry when he does not toe the official Ministry of Magic line that Voldemort has returned to terrorize the magical world. She forces him, in typically old-fashioned school teacher manner, to write out a phrase repeatedly, "I must not tell lies," using a magical quill which carves this phrase into the flesh of Harry's hand. For us on the dissident right, this scene should be all too familiar. You didn't see what you thought you saw. There is no problem of left-wing violence. How dare you spread such misinformation? You must not tell lies. This little episode in particular displays liberal left projection, but also underscores the dissatisfaction of both far left and far right historically with the apathy towards violence that the mainstream of politics has, and the unwillingness to acknowledge violations of social norms and laws by politically radical vanguards. Or, dare I say, even the existence of such vanguards when those radical vanguards are left-wing. In other words, the official line from the Ministry of Magic, the message that Umbridge wants to sink in, is that the existence of Voldemort and his return to corporeal form in books 4 and 5 is politically inconvenient for the Ministry at the time. It changes the decision-making calculus if there is someone or something who could be classified as an enemy of the state. Of course, the Ministry inevitably suffers a coup later on in the series where the Voldemort-aligned factions take power. So really, the moral lesson being given here is that constant vigilance must be maintained at all times. One can never lower one's guard in the presence of snakes. But there is another angle to this little Umbridge episode, which is that these snapshots within the Harry Potter storyline read somewhat like folktales. These little moral lessons which are implanted via the Harry Potter storyline highlight the necessity of how to talk to left-wingers or liberals about fundamental issues that they are physically incapable of understanding. As The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt demonstrates, lefties are simply incapable of understanding issues like racial loyalty, or the inevitability and necessity of hierarchy, or anything resembling sanctity. So, if they cannot understand these things rationally, perhaps they can only understand them pre-rationally if they are presented in a roundabout way. Hence the necessity of the folktale, hence the necessity of the magical. Umbridge as a character can certainly be compared to the figure of Baba Yaga, the witch in the woods who consumes children. For us, the idea that childless career women might be hostile to children or to any future at all is intuitive. But for them, understanding is like wandering a labyrinth. The path winds and weaves through entanglements. It is not straightforward at all. Which folk tale, taught to them as children before any progressive conditioning has been taught, can preempt the anti-white mind virus? Which tale could get them to understand without thinking that women are not to be trusted, for they will betray you to outgroups? This does not mean that these folks will not be left-leaning if so enchanted. Rather, we must seek to do as they have done to us, and to ensure cultural dominance from even the beginning of childhood. To understand whichever old tales can be used for this purpose is of exceptional importance.